Good evening. This is the information session for the affordable homeownership units at the Foundry in Wakefield. My name is David Cashman. I'm with SEB Housing. We are the affordable housing lottery consultant who will be working with any households interested in this opportunity. So if you do end up applying, you'll be seeing a lot of us interacting with our staff. If you have questions about, how to apply and what this opportunity is, we are the ones that you will be working with to get up through the first part of this process. Before I go further, let me just confirm. Looks like we have 4 households on attending by live stream, which is great. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. So I'm going to ask, I'll type the question, and if people could just respond so I know that you can hear me. Tasha, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Sumke. Appreciate it. Okay, great. So this information session is for your benefit. If you have questions at any time, go ahead and just write them down, and I'll pause where I am and try and get to it, unless it's something that I'm going to cover later. And maybe I'll just ask you to wait a minute, because it may be a question that makes more sense to address a little bit later on. And the goal for this information session is to cover just kind of some of the bigger points about what this opportunity is and what you might expect going forward. Hopefully give you a little bit more of a sense of this process. Obviously, I won't cover every detail because that would take far too long. But the good news is, as you go through the application process, if you have questions, we're always available. You can email us, you can call us. It may very well be that you don't even know what your question is until you kind of start to fill out the application. And then you say, oh, now I have this kind of specific question. That's fine. Go ahead and give us a call. I'd be happy to help you with whatever the question may be. Probably the most important thing I can tell you in this whole presentation is that if this opportunity sounds like something that's of interest to you, go ahead and apply. Applications are due by October 26th, so you have about a month. We have to either receive them by the 26th, or they have to be postmarked if you decide to mail it to us. We're pretty open to various forms of communication. We have a 24-hour secure Dropbox outside of our office in Needham. So if you're someone that prefers to fill things out by, print the application, fill it out by hand, and wants to kind of come and drop it off, you can do that. If you prefer to, scan it and email it to us, you can do that. If you want to put it in the mail, you can do that, fax it. So whatever works best for you, we can accommodate. The various ways of getting in touch with us are listed on the first page of the application. So this is an affordable housing opportunity, and what that essentially means is that you are potentially going to be applying for units that are in a beautiful brand new development in Wakefield. These units are scattered throughout the building. There are 4 floors of living at the Foundry. There's 83 units in total. 73 of them will be sold at market rate prices, and 10 of them will be sold at prices that are below market rate. These are the affordable units that are being made available through this opportunity. And in the building, there are a couple different floor plans, but the condos are available in 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. There's no 3 bedroom, there's no studios. And in the affordable, this opportunity, there's going to be 5 1-bedroom units that have 1 bath. And the price for those is almost $251,000. There are also 5 2-bedroom units. The condo fees on those are a little over $200 a month. and the price for those is $282,300. Just to give you a sense, if you go on, and I don't know all the prices for the market rate units, but at least as far as what's advertised on the Foundry's website, units start at 400,000 and go up from there. So these are pretty well discounted off of the market rate. And if you're interested, if you haven't already, they have a pretty nice website that's fully up. So if you just Google the Foundry at Wakefield, you'll find their website right away. You can take virtual tours of some of the units. You can see floor plans. You can see, how the building is laid out. It's a pretty interesting looking building. It's not kind of just your standard box. It's got different roof lines. It's kind of in the form of a U. And we've worked with this development team before on another project. I think they build very nice, very desirable luxury condominiums, and this appears to be another one that fits that criteria. My understanding is a lot of nice amenities and sort of warm greeting area as you walk into the building. And the units will have some very nice high-end features, like the cabinetry is quite nice. And I think they have granite countertops and nice sort of thoughtful lighting throughout. So these, from what I can gather, are going to be very nice units at a deeply discounted price. How do you apply for this opportunity? So there are a number of criteria in order to be eligible to get into the lottery. One of the first criteria is everyone in the household has to be a first-time home buyer, and in a moment we'll talk about what that is. The household's income and assets must be below certain thresholds, and that probably comes as no surprise. If you're going to be buying a home that is deeply discounted, you need to meet certain income and asset criteria. If you're someone who's quite wealthy or is above those, then this is not the opportunity for such individuals. To apply, you need to have a mortgage pre-approval that you would submit with your application. And finally, you can't have a financial interest in the development. This is not something that comes up with much frequency, although it does happen from time to time. If you happen to be, related to the Scott Seavers team, he's the developer, or someone who is working with the development team or the sales team, that could unfortunately disqualify you. And there is a question about that in the application. Again, it's not something that we see come up a lot, but that is the rule. So let's talk first about the income limits. Income limits, just to be very clear, are your gross income. Okay, so it's not your net income, it's not your after-tax income. It is the gross income on your that you take in each year. And income in this program is defined broadly. So the kind of obvious ways that people typically think about income, sort of the most obvious is, if you're a W-2 employee, what's on your pay stubs, how much do you make each year? And that certainly counts. But there are other forms of income that people have as well, which we're required to count in this program. So, for example, if you're self-employed, you have a little side gig, on top of what you do in your W-2 job. Maybe you at one point drove for Uber or Lyft or something like that, or are currently doing that, or you sell stuff on eBay or whatever the case may be. The money that you make from that counts as income. Additionally, if you're someone who receives child support or alimony, that's income. If you get Social Security, that's income. If you have a pension and you're drawing down regularly, a retirement that you have a regular distribution from, that's income. If you receive unemployment compensation or workman's compensation, or if you have severance pay, that's all income. So There's also interest income. So one of the things you'll have to disclose when you apply is your various assets. Sometimes assets generate income. Oftentimes not that much, but sometimes they generate a decent amount. So if you have an asset, it could even just be, say, a bank account. Typically, bank accounts don't generate much income, but they can generate a little bit. That's an income stream that would need to be added to your overall income to see if you still are underneath the income limits. Another one that sometimes comes up that kind of sneaks up on people because it's just not sort of intuitive is if they're getting money. It's not just sort of a one-time thing, but if you're getting repeated payments from like a friend or a family member, maybe to just help with groceries or some other life item that you need help with, that's great. For better or worse, the program requires that we count that as income. Again, if this is just like a once in a blue moon kind of thing that a friend or family member floats you a couple $100 to help with something, that's different. But if it's every week or every 2 weeks or every month, recurring, and we see that every month you get $300 and it's just to help with groceries or something, that's still income. Okay, so when you're filling out your application, go through the table that we provide, because we've put a lot of different potential income sources on there. Ones that we've seen through the years, ones that can come up sometimes, things that people don't necessarily think about. You want to take a moment to really look through those and make sure that you're not saying that some of them may not apply, because after the lottery, and we'll get there in a bit, when you have to provide all of the documentation that shows what your income is, we're going to be looking at these sources. And if you didn't list, if you forgot to list that you have a side job selling stuff on eBay and you make another, $5,000 or $10,000 a year, that could put you over the income limit, which would be too bad. But hopefully you won't fall into that trap if you just take your time filling out the income table when you fill out the application. Okay, so what are the income limits? The income limits are based on the household size. So it really depends, who are you applying with? These are the people that are going to be living in the unit with you. So if you're just a household size of 1, you can make up to $67,400. A household size of 2 can make up to $77,000. Household size of 3 can make up to $86,650, and a household size of 4 can make up to $96,250. You don't have to memorize these figures. These are littered throughout the information packet, the application, the ad. They're on our website, so don't worry. You don't have to, write that down or memorize it. It's all there. And those are the maximum income limits, and we have to look at those pretty stringently and with with a lot of attention to detail, because those are the program requirements. So unfortunately, if you're over those, you would be ineligible for the program. And again, remember, this is gross income from all of your income sources for everyone who you're applying with, who's going to be living in the unit with you. Now, there are a couple exceptions to that. Minors who are dependents, we are not counting the income that they make from a job. Okay, if they're getting money from a trust or something, that's different. But if minor who's a dependent, money that they make from a job, we do not count that. Also, full-time students who are dependents, we only count $480. Anything above that, we don't count. So even if they make $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year for a full-time student who's a dependent, we would only count $480 of that income. There's no minimum income to be eligible for this opportunity. So we're not reviewing this to say you don't make enough, you don't qualify. However, with your application, you do need to submit a mortgage pre-approval. And there's a whole page on this in the information packet that talks about some of the requirements around the mortgage pre-approval. And those are specific. And we'll get to that in a moment. But just make sure that, and that's listed in the application, but in order to submit an application that we can review, you do need to provide a pre-approval that meets the program requirements. So that's kind of a bit about income. Everyone's income circumstances are kind of unique and different. If you have questions about your specific income picture, we can work through that with you if there's something that you're not quite sure about. If you are self-employed, you will need to, at some point, fill out we can provide you with a form where you can list out kind of what your income is. That will help you, show what you take in, what your business expenses are, and therefore what the income is that you generate from that self-employment source. In addition to income limits, there are asset limits. So households cannot have more than $75,000 in assets. And those are calculated at the time that you apply. Included in your assets is money that you would use for a down payment. So, if a friend or family member is going to float you some money to use towards the down payment, that does count towards that $75,000 asset limit. Like your income, the program requires that we count assets pretty expansively. So you'll see in the application that there's a whole range of different asset sources that we have determined over the years. These are the things that often come up. So probably like income, where the kind of the most common thing that people often think of is their salary, or what they make in their primary job. Maybe the most common thing that people think of when they think of assets is what do they have in their checking account and savings account. And it may be that is what you have in your assets, but maybe you also have other assets that you're not immediately thinking of. So for example, now a lot of people use things like Venmo and PayPal. And, if someone sends you a Venmo for money, it goes into your app and it kind of sits there until you, I think, accept it or you pay it on to someone else. But that money, when you apply, that's in your Venmo account or your PayPal account, is really kind of analogous to money that you would have in a checking account or a saving account. And it's an asset just the same. Or if you have a trust in your name, that's an asset. If you have a retirement account, a 401k or an IRA, those are also assets. Stocks, bonds, those are assets. So a property that you own would be an asset. So as with the personal property, we're not concerned about. Okay, so your car, jewelry, TV, things like that, that is not a concern. But real property, if you own a home somewhere, that is an asset that we would count. And you can't own a home. Okay, so if there's anyone watching this who does own a home and who's interested in this opportunity, your home has to be sold. It has to be under P&S before you can move forward in reserving a unit, and it has to be sold, closed on, before you would close on one of these units. Sumke, your question is, what about 529 plan? I gotta be honest, is a 529, it's a type of, is that a retirement, type of retirement plan, I think? If it is, then it would count. It's an education account. To my knowledge, right, of course, sorry. Of course, yes, that would count, okay? So that's a savings, asset, same as any other. So sorry, I don't know why I blanked for a second on what a 529 was, but yep, that is an asset. Um, now, with things like 401ks and retirement funds, now you may not be able to access it right now, in which case you'd be listing what the net cash value is. I don't actually know if there's anything analogous for 529. I would probably need someone who does the processing on my team. I don't know if it's the kind of thing where if you tried to access it now, there could be any type of penalty. If there is, then what the net cash value would be what we'd be counting, not the full amount. So if Sumke or Tasha, if you have questions about that, you can email me, David at SEB Housing, and I'd be happy to follow up with my team and get back to you on some of the nuances around that. Okay, so going back, so we've talked a little bit about income, we've talked about assets, and just to be clear, you do have to qualify for both. So there's no exception if you're kind of barely under one, but you don't quite meet the other, or vice versa. You have to meet both requirements. I had indicated before that, so we've talked about income and assets a little bit. Everyone in the house also has to be a first-time home buyer. That means you can't have owned a home in the last 3 years. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. There are 5. 2 of them virtually never come up. Those would be a household who owned a property that was not in compliance with state, local, or other building codes, or a household who owned a residence that was not permanently affixed to a foundation. I don't know that I've seen those before, but the 3 exceptions that do sometimes come up is a household that was a displaced homemaker. So if you worked primarily without remuneration in the last couple of years in a home that you owned with your spouse, that is an exception to this rule. So you would, you do have to have the house out of your name, and also, as with any applicant, if you are still married, we have to count your spouse's income and assets as well, even if they're not going to be living there. Typically, you would need to get the house out of your name and finalize the divorce if the spouse isn't going to be living there with you. Another exception is for single parents. This would be, you have to have at least joint custody of the child, and you can no longer own the home that you owned with your partner in the past 3 years. Unless we're going to be counting your partner's income and assets, which you may or may not want, you would need to have finalized the divorce. And then also, probably the one that comes up the most often are for age-qualified households. So if someone in the household was over or is over the age of 55 and owned a home, that would be an exception to this rule. Now, of course, they still need to sell the home, but the fact that they owned a home in the last 3 years does not disqualify them. And again, these things don't have to be finalized. Like if you own a home and you're applying, the home does not have to be sold at the time you apply. But once we run the lottery and we create the waiting list before we pass you on to the sales team to move on to the next step, that home does need to be under P&S because we need to see what the sale price is going to be, and what you expect to make on it, so we can figure out what the assets are that you expect to realize from the sale of that home. Similarly with, if anyone's married but is looking to move, if that is contemplating divorce and pursuing this opportunity as if they won't be moving in with the spouse, the process of starting the divorce needs to be started when you apply. It doesn't need to be finished, but it does need to be finished by the time that we run the lottery so we can figure out whether you're eligible. Okay. So when you apply, as I said at the beginning, there are one-bedroom units and there are two-bedroom units. You can apply for either or both, and there's really no downside to applying for both if you think you might have interest in both. The reason for that is because every household who's eligible for this opportunity will be on a waiting list for the bedroom size that they are eligible for. So it is quite possible that folks could be eligible for both one-bedroom units and two-bedroom units. And maybe you're not quite sure. Maybe you'd be happy with either. If you think you might be, I can't stress enough, apply for both. There's really no downside. You won't sort of prejudice your application in any way or your position on a waiting list by applying for both. So if you think you might be interested in both, check them both off. Conversely, if you say that you're only applying for a one-bedroom, and then later on down the line, after we've run the lottery, you say, "Oh, I actually would also like to be considered for a two-bedroom," it's not as easy as just switching you onto the two-bedroom list. So definitely better to be more inclusive rather than less inclusive. Now, also in your application, you'll be asked to say what household type you are. And there are only two types of households that you can be. You can be a household type 2 or you can be a household type 1. And really what that means is a household type 2 is a household who by program rules needs two bedrooms. And a household type 1 is a household who only needs one bedroom. And for the two-bedroom waiting list, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, household type 2 will get priority over household type 1. For the one-bedroom waiting list, it'll be equal priority. But the larger, the type 2 households who need two bedrooms will get priority over type 1 households for two-bedroom units. And there are check boxes in the application. There really aren't that many permutations of kind of household compositions. You could have a 4 or 3 person household. Those will always be type 2 households. Those households will always need two bedrooms by program rules. If you have two heads of households one of whom has a medical condition that they can't sleep in the same bedroom, they would need two bedrooms. Or if it's a parent and a child, they would need two bedrooms. But if it's just a one-person household, or two heads of household, like a married couple, they would be a type 1 household. Okay. Can a type 1 household apply for a two-bedroom unit? Yes, they may, but again, they won't receive priority. Now, when you apply for the lottery, if you are eligible, you will get a lottery application number. And that number will be in the form of A dot blank, 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 whatever it is, maybe A.001, A.002, A.003. Those numbers just correspond to the order in which we received your application. And they do not represent kind of where you'll be in the lottery or where you'll be on the waiting list or anything like that. So don't draw any inference about the number you get. It is merely an anonymous identifier that indicates when we received your lottery application number. Make sure when you get that letter from us that you read it, because in that letter we'll list a number of facts about your application, including who you applied with. Okay, so make sure that the people who are listed are accurate, because that's the household composition that we're approving. And in this program, you can't just start sort of mixing and matching household composition later on in the process, right? So actually, if you say I'm applying with Bill, and then later in the process you say I want to swap out Bill and add John, it may not be that easy. So be thoughtful when you're filling out your application about who it is that's likely going to be living in this unit with you. It will also list what household type you are, type 1 or type 2. So make sure you read that, make sure it's accurate. It'll list, when the lottery is, what bedroom size you applied for, whether you had local preference or not. So just make sure you look at all of that, make sure it's accurate. If there's something that needs to be changed, let us know, because it's important to get that stuff right before we proceed with the lottery. Before we go into more detail about the lottery, I should actually back up for just a minute about the mortgage pre-approval standards. I mentioned the mortgage that you do need to submit a mortgage pre-approval with your application. And there are some specific requirements that need to be met for the mortgage pre-approval. And there's actually a page 10 of the information packet that lists what those mortgage standards are. I would recommend, when you go to a bank to apply for a mortgage pre-approval, make a photocopy of this page, rip it out if you don't need it, and bring it to them and show it to them. We have listed some lenders who are familiar with the affordable program, who you may choose to use. You don't have to. You can choose any lender of your liking. But it's important to have a lender who knows some of the program requirements. If you get a lender who's kind of unfamiliar, you may find that becomes an impediment to kind of moving forward later on. Of course, you don't have to go back to, you could get a pre-approval from Bank A and later on you could get a commitment from Bank B. But point is, definitely good to have a bank involved that has some familiarity with the affordable program. There's some banks with some nice, kind of products that are geared towards the affordable program. And if they have, loaned on an affordable unit before, there won't be, hopefully many surprises or any surprises as you move through this process. And so I would just, show them this page. And that, if they say, yeah, no problem, we can meet all of these requirements, great. That may be the bank that you want to use. But if they're kind of hemming and hawing and it seems like they may have trouble, finding a product that meets those requirements, there may be another bank that you would want to use instead. Again, that is on page 10 of the information packet. There's also, ultimately, if you are able to buy a unit through this process, there will be a deed rider that will be executed and then recorded when you close on a unit. And the deed rider has a number of restrictions in it that make sure that the unit stays affordable and a whole host of other requirements. We have an example deed rider on our website. If you go to our website, www.sebhousing.com, and you may print that out and bring that because, for banks that are familiar with this process and have products geared towards affordable units, that deed rider and some of the restrictions in it shouldn't be a problem. But for other banks who maybe aren't as kind of versed in the affordable program, the restrictions in the deed rider could be problematic, and the bank's going to see it ultimately. And it's probably better to get that out in the open earlier on rather than later. So again, you can go right on our website. You can print out a copy of the deed rider, and bringing it to the bank when you get your pre-approval is not a bad idea, just to make sure that they're fully aware up front so it doesn't become an issue later. Okay, so the deadline, like I said at the beginning, to apply is October 26th, and the lottery will be on November 5th. We will be able to create the waiting list probably the night of the lottery. And if you have email, you will get the waiting list from us that same night. If you don't have email, we'll send something to you, in snail mail, and it may take a day or two to get it. Let me tell you a little bit about how the lottery works. So in the lottery, we will put, there'll be two drawings, okay? There'll be a local preference drawing and a general drawing. So as I said at the beginning, there are 10 units total that are being made available through this process. 5 2-bedroom units and 5 1-bedroom units. Now, town of Wakefield, when this job was being when they were reviewing the plans, they had requested that certain households who qualified for local preference be given a priority over other households who don't qualify for local preference for 7 of the units, okay? So not all 10, only 7. What does local preference mean? Well, that means you live in Wakefield, or you work in Wakefield, or you have kids attending the Wakefield schools, okay? So for 7 out of the 10 units, households who qualify for local preference will get priority over households who don't qualify for local preference. When we do the lottery drawing in November, we will do a local preference drawing and we'll do a general drawing. And in those drawings, I'll draw the numbers. Those are the A.001 or A.002 out of a box. I'll hold them up because we'll still be, doing this via YouTube live stream, so households can, see them as I pick them out. Now, as I'm drawing it, you won't know exactly what it means, and you won't know exactly what that means for a number of reasons. First of all, you don't know, the other households, what unit type they've applied for. You don't know what type of household they are, and you don't know if they qualify for local preference or not. Okay, so the lottery is sort of anticlimactic, to be totally honest with you, because it's not, as you're watching me draw the numbers out, not that it'll take that long, you just don't know exactly what that means in that moment because there are all these unknowns around all of the other numbers that I'm drawing, right? I mean, if you get drawn 5th in the lottery, you might say, well, what does that mean? And the answer is, well, you don't know, because maybe the 4 households ahead of you only applied for 1-bedroom units and you applied for a 2-bedroom. So if you think, hey, I'm 5th, that would be an inaccurate assumption at that time. Now, the good news is, even though when I'm doing the lottery drawing in November, even though you won't know exactly what it means as I pick the numbers out of the hat, that same night, I will have sorted the lottery results onto the waiting list. And there will be 3 waiting lists, and those waiting lists will tell you exactly where you are relative to other households, and will give you a sense of when you're going to be given the opportunity to move forward to the next step in this process. Now, how do those waiting lists get composed? Well, for the 2-bedroom units, those are all local preference units. So that means any type 2 household, and we've laid this out in the waiting list composition on page 14 of the information packet, if you're curious how the sausage gets made. But for the 5 2-bedroom units, type 2 local preference households will be in the top tier, regardless of when they're drawn in the lottery. They could be the last households drawn. They'll be the first households on that waiting list. They will be followed by type 2 non-local preference households. Now, you might be saying, wait a second, Dave, I thought you said local preference households get priority over non-local preference households. And they do, but household type trumps local preference on the 2-bedroom waiting list. So what that means is type 2 local preference will be followed by type 2 non-local preference, will be followed by type 1 local preference, will be followed by type 1 non-local preference. You don't have to memorize that. You don't really have to know that at all. It's just more for your own curiosity, because, again, the way these waiting lists are composed and the way the lottery works is sort of different than what we usually think of in lotteries. Usually in lotteries, the winner is drawn and that's it. Everyone else is, quote unquote, a loser, I guess. There aren't winners and losers. Everyone will have a position on a waiting list that they're eligible for. So if you apply for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, and we tell you you're eligible for both, and you are in fact eligible for both, and I'll say more on that in a second, then you'll have positions on both of those waiting lists. I can't guarantee where that position will be, but you'll have a position. And if you're only eligible for one or the other, you'll have a position on whatever one you were eligible for. So it doesn't, these lotteries are a little bit different than the way we kind of typically think of lotteries, with sort of winners and losers. Now, for the one-bedroom units, household type doesn't matter, because type 2 households and type 1 households have the same priority. There's no priority for household type there. So for 2 of the one-bedroom units, there is a local preference attached. So any local preference households will be in the top tier for 2 of the one-bedroom units, followed by any households who aren't local preference. But there are 3 one-bedroom units that don't have a local preference, so those will be just determined by, and there's no household type priority. So for the 3 one-bedroom units that don't have local preference, those waiting lists will correspond to the order in which I did the lottery drawing. Again, you don't need to know you don't need to know this. You certainly don't need to memorize it. If you're curious, page 14 will show you exactly how the waiting lists are going to be composed, just to kind of give you a sense. But this is not something that you need to know. Now, the night of the lottery, I will send you the waiting lists, as I said, and that will tell you where you are on those lists. They'll be in order, and then you'll have an idea. Okay, I'm 3rd on the 2-bedroom, or I'm 1st on the 2-bedroom. And if you're in the top 5 on the 2-bedroom, there's 5 2-bedroom units, then you're getting a chance to move on to the next step. If you're number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever it may be, you may get to move on. It'll depend on what happens with the households ahead of you. Now, you might ask, well, if I'm number 6, does that mean I'm never going to get a chance? No, it absolutely doesn't mean that. MC 153 got you. Hold on one second. If you're if you're not in the top 5, that doesn't mean necessarily that you're not going to get to move forward, because the households ahead of you may not end up being able to buy a unit for one reason or another. And in fact, it's rare that there's 100% conversion rate, so to speak. So, it's possible that the top 5 households on the 2-bedroom unit may buy those 5 2-bedroom units, but it's, I would say, highly to very highly unlikely. Things happen. People end up changing their mind. They may end up not actually being eligible for one reason or another. Things happen, and more often than not, we need to screen 2 or 3 times as many units as there are to fill those units. So if you're number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, don't despair. Your opportunity may still come up. You may just have to be a little patient to see what happens with the households ahead of you. Sorry, MC 153, thanks for your patience. How many applications are you expecting to receive? The truth is, I don't know. I never really know with these things. I can tell you that as of right now, we have received 6 applications of people who are complete. So right now there are six households in the lottery, but there's still another month, and oftentimes applications start coming in, more quickly as we get closer to the deadline. Now, I want to say something else here. I was just kind of mentioning how if you're not in, if you're number 6, for example, on the 2-bedroom list, that's not necessarily, cause for despair to think that you're never going to get to move forward. And that's kind of a nice segue into the fact that when you apply for the lottery, SEB Housing, we're not requiring you to submit the income and asset documentation that supports your claims of what your income and assets are. We'll take it on face value for purposes of entering you into the lottery. But once we run the lottery and we create the waiting list, then you're going to have to provide all of that documentation that shows, that buttresses what you put in your application. Okay. Now, when you get your eligibility notice for the lottery, one of the things that we will send you is a document requirements guide. And that guide is going to lay out for you the documents that will eventually be required of you if you're invited to move forward after the lottery. So if you are not a procrastinator, you may start collecting those things so that if you do get a high spot on the waiting list in the lottery, you have a file ready to go. And when we reach out to you and say, congratulations, Mr. Smith, you're first on the 2-bedroom list, you now have 7 days to get us all of this documentation. You say, hey, no problem. I've got my file ready to go. Here you go. If you haven't done that, I really encourage you to begin building that file if you're serious about this opportunity, because the amount of documentation is significant. It's basically akin to the amount of documentation that you would need to provide in getting a mortgage commitment. So you're producing a lot of asset statements, bank account statements, 3 years of tax returns, W-2s, 5 most recent pay stubs, things that may not be that hard to get, but why wait till the end? And it would be especially disappointing if you had a great waiting list position and ultimately lost it because you couldn't get all of the documentation together in time after the lottery. So highly recommend you start building your file. That guide will take you through what's required. You can just put it in a little file, store it away, and that way, if your turn comes up, you'll have it ready. Brian, can I get the local preference documents needed now? Yeah, you can get them now. I don't think we are requiring them with the lottery application. Yeah, so after the lottery. So you can get them now, and that way you'll have that in your file if your turn comes up after the lottery. Now, as far as so you get to the you submit an application. If you're eligible, you get your number. Okay, Tasha. So the materials we send to SCB for the lottery are the completed application and the pre-approval. Correct. Right, Tasha. And so the documents will not be required to get you into the lottery. They will be required after the lottery if you have a high enough position that you're invited to move forward. And if you have a really high position on the waiting list, that could be right away, right? So if you're in one of those top spots, Tasha, you can expect right away that we'll be reaching out to you to say, okay, submit the documentation. If you don't have one of those top spots, you may still get that invitation, but maybe it'll be 2 weeks or something, or 3 weeks before one of the households ahead of you ultimately isn't moving forward for whatever reason. And now we know that there's a unit that was, has become available, and your turn's up next. And we say, okay, Tasha, okay, now you have a week to submit all the documentation. So just to kind of recap where I was there, if you're eligible, you apply. If you're interested, you apply. If you're eligible, you get a lottery application number. We'll run the lottery in November. You'll get the waiting list that night, so you'll know. If you have a high position, you will be invited to submit all the documentation that shows that you're eligible. If you're not eligible, unfortunately, you'll be dropped from the waiting list, and this process will be over for you. If you are eligible, great. You will now move into the next step in the process. And the next step in the process is for households to reserve the unit of their choice. And so what that means is, like if you're number one on the two bedroom waiting list, you'll be able to select from any of the 5 2-bedrooms, and you can count on probably having about 10 days to reserve the unit of your choice. or actually, I apologize, count on having about 5 days to reserve the unit of your choice. And then, maybe 2 weeks to then enter into a P&S after you've reserved the unit. Once you've reserved that unit, then the next household on the waiting list behind you would be able to choose from the remaining 4 units. Once they've reserved their unit, they will enter into that same process of entering into a P&S. Now you only have 3 units left, and the next household can choose from those 3. Okay, and the same thing will happen on the 1-bedroom list. The only difference for the 1-bedroom list is, again, you have your local preference list and your general list. They'll start with the local preference list. So the top, two households from the local preference list will get to reserve 2 of the 1-bedroom list, 2 of the 1-bedrooms. Then that list will no longer be used, and the general list will be used to fill the remaining 3 1-bedroom units. And so, at this point, I think the process probably tracks pretty closely to what you might expect if just buying a market rate unit where you enter into a P&S and, there'd be a mortgage commitment date and a date set for closing. This is a point in the process where you may want to, have an attorney come take a look at the P&S, review it for you, make sure that, everything looks good, or, maybe they want to make a couple suggestions or edits on your behalf. You're not required to do that, but probably not a bad idea. You probably want to have them take a look at the deed rider. If this isn't obvious already, this is not like a investment opportunity program. So, if anyone is thinking, I'm going to buy an affordable unit and then flip it in, a year from now for market rate price, that's not not how this program works. The deed rider that will be filed with the unit will ensure it remains affordable in perpetuity, and the gain that you can realize is kind of limited by a formula. Again, it's not a formula you need to kind of worry about or know. I think you can probably, maybe you realize a couple $1,000s or so in potential profit if you were to sell the unit down the line. But this is really not, I would not sort of count on this being, an investment, because the amount that you can resell one of these units for is limited, pretty strictly limited by the deed rider. I wish I could tell you exactly what will happen. I can't, because it's a formula that relies upon a number that changes every year, and I don't know what that number will be next year, much less what it might be in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, if that's when you end up, if you were to end up selling your unit. So I guess I can just kind of stick to the more general that, the gains that you might be able to realize on selling a unit are pretty limited. You can make, sometimes house will wonder about, improvements to the unit, and those are questions we see. Household says, I want to upgrade the countertops, or I want to upgrade the floor to hardwood or whatever. Again, I think these are pretty nice units, so maybe no households will feel any need to do that, but maybe they will. I don't know. And, you can do that, but assuming that, the builder can accommodate it, and that may depend on a number of factors, including how far along the unit is, but those have to be paid for separately from the P&S, and they aren't things like, if this is just a kind of improvement that you would like to make, that's not necessary. It's just something that you would desire. That's not money that's not an investment that you can recapture down the road when you go to sell the unit. So, if you say, hey, I want to spend $5,000 upgrading the floor to cherry or whatever it is, again, you can do that, but you got to pay for it separately, and you don't then get to add that value to the resale price 10 years down the road when you want to sell the unit. Now, if it's something like a pipe broke and it leaked and the ceiling had to be improved, then that would be different because that's something that you need to do. We do, towards the end of the information packet, give you what that formula is. Again, you're not required to know this, but if you're curious, take a look at page 21. We give an example of how the resale price formula is, what that formula is, and sort of an example of how that might look like. And I think that's about all I got. Hopefully that gives you a decent sense of the overall process. Does anyone have any questions that I didn't address? Anything that I can kind of review or make clearer? Or again, if you don't know your question now and you find later you have one, totally fine. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to kind of help walk you through it. We totally understand. Are homeowners able to rent a bedroom after purchase? No. So this has to be your principal residence, and you are not allowed to use it as a rental property. So you can't rent out your bedrooms. Any other questions? And for the two households, Tasha and Sumke, I know you were asking earlier about the 529. Please feel free to email me at david@sebhousing.com. I can see if there are any other details about that would be helpful for you to know. I would just need to ask one of our application processors, but I'm more than happy to do that. But I won't know how to get you that info unless you email me. So shoot me an email, david@sebhousing.com, and I'd be happy to see if there are any other details surrounding that would be pertinent for you to know. Any other questions? All right, everyone. Well, thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope that you found this helpful. There's a great opportunity. These look like beautiful units, and if you think you're interested in, just get that application in. Hopefully it won't take too long. You don't need the supporting documentation yet, so fill it out, and if you're eligible, you get a lottery application number and move forward. So thanks a lot, and have a great night, everyone. Okay, bye.